Nicholas Cavello here with Professor of English and Director of the Disability Studies Program, Dr. Rustasy, to discuss the Center for Race, Culture, and Social Justice, which holds a regular colloquial series event on the third Wednesday of every month. Dr. Rustasy, thank you so much for being here today.
You're very welcome.
So, Doctor, for those listeners out there who do not know exactly what these events are about, can you just get into a little detail exactly what you do when meeting every third of Wednesday of every month?
Okay, so once a month, they invite faculty in to talk about research that they are doing that is relevant to social justice questions. So definitely could be race, but in my case, it's disability studies. And I think you're really just explaining one of your projects and how it fits into that structure.
And now we understand that this is for it's and engaging with the new scholarship focusing on race and social justice. So I guess the question here is why is it important for us as students to learn this and take this into consideration?
So I would say a couple of reasons. First of all, for me, particularly when it comes to disability studies, so many students now are working toward degrees or careers in the health professions. And I think it's a very useful, maybe alternative perspective on some of the conditions that they might be working on. So disability studies looks at disability really as a social construct and not necessarily as something to be cured, right? And in part as something that maybe requires the society to make adjustments to deal with or accommodate people who have some kind of anomaly. And that's an alternative view, right? The medical view might be that it's really not a social matter, it's an individual matter. And we kind of fix them, we cure them. And there are, some kinds of disabilities where people actually aren't sure they want to be cured or fixed. A lot of people in the deaf community see themselves as a linguistic minority and not necessarily as people who need to be changed, but maybe who need a different place in society. And I think more recently, too, maybe with neurodiversity, people have kind of tried to avoid thinking of various forms of neurodiversity as pathologies, as diseases, and maybe as different forms of the way human brains work. I think the analogy that's maybe implied in that term is even to biodiversity, right? We benefit from biodiversity. We benefit from the fact that there are lots of species and lots of forms of those species. And I think the implication for people in the neurodiversity movement is that the world and society benefits from a diverse ways that minds work.
So for today, what is going to be some work that you're going to be looking forward to, or has anything ever stood out to you specifically that particulates to what you're trying to preach today that you want to set across your message?
Well, so what I'm presenting today is actually about kind of discovering a source, a different unrecognized source of what we call the social model of disability. And that's really has been foundational to both disability studies and disability activism. Right? And it relates to what I was just saying. So one model would have been the medical model, where you think that a disability is a individual medical condition that either can or cannot be cured or fixed. The social model looked at variations, anomalies, ways that people are different maybe from the majority, and argued that that becomes a problem, that becomes a disability, that anomaly becomes a disability only when we're operating within a environment, a social or physical environment that makes it a disability. And that's been fundamental, as I said, to disability studies. Disability studies really sort of looks at disability as a social construct, a social and cultural construct. So seeing that what disability might mean might vary from one society to another, from one culture to another, was fundamental to developing that discipline. In that way, it's analogous, say, to women's studies or Africana studies. And then also, once you moved from thinking that having people think that their disability was their individual problem to be fixed, maybe with the assistance of medical professionals, to thinking that it's sort of a social problem where society might need to change how it um, accommodates or makes room for variation, then you have the basis for disability activism, for people lobbying for something like the Americans with Disabilities Act, and for demanding accessible environments, anti-discrimination laws. You really needed the social model to make that happen.
Now, you're a professor here. We want to know, is there anything that you see or other possible ways that we can get this social construct of an idea out to your students or just people in general to be more aware about how people should handle their disabilities?
I mean, there are a couple things. First of all, obviously the curriculum that we offer in the disability studies minor tries to get that across. A few years ago, I guess 2 years ago, the common reading that the first year students were asked to do was an essay by a colleague of mine that is called "What Disability Studies Has to Offer Medical Education." That was an opportunity to introduce, probably more than 1,500 entering students to some of the concepts. So we had a panel speaking during Welcome Week about that. There is also on campus an organization called DREAM. It's a student organization. It stands for Disability Rights, Education, Activism, and Mentoring. And it's an organization for students with disabilities or their allies. That becomes a real opportunity to gather and to understand these perspectives on disability. And I think also last spring, as I recall, Student Affairs had a sort of hashtag Disabled at Hofstra Day, again, to gather people and to get them to interact and to share their experiences. Also, I'm on two um, diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging committees, one for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, one for the university more widely. And the fact that we're kind of including in those discussions disability as a form of diversity, I think also helps get the information across.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, being a student, I think, well, for me at least, I like to attend these events. I like when typically they're held, and it's something of a more of an eye opener. Where exactly is this event located, and how people could get involved?
It is in 203 Roosevelt Hall. Yes, and I hear there's going to be food, so that's even better.
Once again, Dr. Rusty, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate you for coming out.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with me.